Welcome to my presentation about the garden I created for my women's spirituality course, which was meant to represent the 7 feminine archetypes that the Greek goddesses symbolize and how these relate to my own personal femininity. So first I'm going to explain how I came up with this idea, and then I'm going to talk about each of the goddesses individually and what they symbolize and how this relates to me as a woman. And then I'm going to explain how I created the garden. And at the end, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary about what I learned from this exercise and what I'm going to take away from it. So I came up with this idea because I went online to get ideas for this project, and I found an article called The 7 Feminine Archetypes, it should say. Which one are you? And so I followed the link in this article to a quiz, and I took the quiz, and what it suggested was that I most resembled Demeter, who is the mother archetype. But in reading further, I also could relate to aspects of each of the 7 goddesses in terms of my own femininity. So I decided to create a garden that reflected all of them. Now, the first one, Demeter, is the one that the quiz suggested I most relate to. And I can see why when I think about my femininity and my past and the fact that I am a single mother with 2 girls. And in them growing up, they were a very central focus of my life and took precedence over everything else, including other aspects of my femininity, such as my relationship with men or my relationship even with other women. They basically took up all of my time outside of work. And the positive aspects of that, in terms of the mother archetype, is that mothers are nurturing and compassionate and caring and supportive and devoted. And I hope my children would agree that all of those things apply to me. The negative aspect of it, or the shadow of that, is also applicable to me, which is that sometimes I do have difficulty setting boundaries with my children, with people I care most about, with men in relationships. And I often do put other people's needs before my own, which is fine, except for that over time that can lead to resentment and very unhealthy relationship dynamics. So I love the fact that this article looks at both sides of each of the archetypes, and it really got me thinking about, that shadow side and the areas of improvement. So in terms of the flower, there was 2 flowers that represent Demeter, the poppy and the sunflower. I chose the sunflower because I love the color of sunflowers. It's bright, brilliant, and to me, that brilliant yellow color is so much a part of nature and the nature around me. You can even see behind the flower in the garden, there's yellow goldenrods, and just the brilliant yellow color does to me really symbolize that a nurturing, compassionate, and the bounty that Demeter represents. Now, her daughter Persephone has a different kind of archetype, which is the innocent, idealistic, kind of young, youthful person. Um, and I do have an aspect of my femininity that is that way as well. So I do relate to Persephone very much. And in the past, like her, in situations where I've been overly passive, especially in my relationships with men and naive, given people opportunities to hurt me because I perceive them to be a good person, when in truth their motives were not positive. So um, I relate to that as well. Now, the story of Persephone was that as she was picking a beautiful flower, Hades grabbed her and pulled her into the underworld and kept her captive there. And while she was captive there, her mother Demeter was mortified. And because Demeter represents the harvest, um, what happened during the time period where Persephone was captive was that the whole world dried up and there was a drought until Zeus sent a rescue mission, brought Persephone out from the underworld. But in the meantime, Persephone had eaten the fruit from the pomegranate, and what that meant was that she'd always have to go back and spend time in the underworld. So this is that shows that shadow side. In terms of her flower, I thought this oriental lily, which Turnbull says is one of the flowers that represents her best represented her, and it's because it's so delicate, so beautiful, so lush, and to me it does very much symbolize Persephone. Hestia is the mystic. So this is another aspect of my personality that I've been developing more recently, and especially because my mother died suddenly about 2.5 years ago. She fell and had a massive brain injury and died overnight. So it was a very big shock to me. And ever since then, I've been in this sort of a cocoon state, so to speak, where I've become very inward focused and spiritually inclined. And I've really been thinking about that aspect of my femininity very much in the last couple of years. So that the positive side of that is the is that spiritually inclined side. The negative side of that is the social isolation, and I have experienced some of that as well. And this social awkwardness that happens when you spend too much time on your own. So there's that. Her flower is the purple cornflower. So you see there a picture of the purple cornflower in the garden and Hestia's picture. Now Athena is also sort of a mystic, but she's more of an extroverted mystic. So she's very rational. This reminds me of my daughter Sarah very much. She speaks the truth, is very disciplined. Like she can get up and do something even when she and her heart doesn't feel able to. And she's very wise. But the bad side or the shadow side of that is that sometimes people who are like this, who are very in their heads, can lack empathy for others because they themselves can pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get it done, even when they're feeling crappy. And so they look at others who aren't able to do that, and sometimes they lack empathy for them. And also, they're always forward focused, so they can lack mindfulness. They're not paying attention to what's going on in the moment. They're always looking to the next step. So for this goddess, the flower, the only flower, was the tiger lily. And that made me chuckle a little because for the last 2 months, I've been creating some flower gardens in my front yard and that were previously inhabited by tiger lilies. And it's been hell getting those tiger lilies out of those flower beds because they're so vigorous and strong, and they have these little networks that go on forever, and you have to keep digging and digging down to get every single bulb out. And even then, I created a pile of tiger lily bulbs, and they're starting to grow in the pile, so I called it Tiger Lily Mountain. But anyway, so the tiger lily, I think, really does very much fit this persona. Now, I do have, I think, a very small aspect of my femininity might fall into this category, but I really don't think it is a major part of my femininity or personality. Now, Hera the Queen, my roommate did the quiz as well, and she found out that this archetype fit her the best. And I can see why, because both the positive and shadow aspects very much are reflected in her personality. So the Queen is very loyal to those she loves, successful, ambitious, but she's also a bit of a hothead and has trouble committing to things. So she'll be moving around a lot and in need of constant stimulation. So it's kind of like an ADHD side of things. And I have been this way in little parts of my life, but it's definitely not a big aspect of my femininity. And so she is represented by the lily. So I found this beautiful lily for her. Now, Artemis, she is the huntress. And again, she's very independent, free-spirited, self-reliant, and she's connected to nature. I do relate to this much more strongly than the other two previous goddesses because I am very independent, very free-spirited and self-reliant. I learned to be that way from a very young age because I'm the fifth of five children in a very busy family. So I became very self-reliant and I'm able to amuse myself. And one of the ways I do that is by communing with nature. I just love nature, always have since I was a little girl. Now, again, the bad side of that or the shadow side of that is because I'm so independent, free-spirited, and self-reliant, it's easy for me just to ignore the fact that there's other people in the world and just be on my own. And I'm perfectly happy that way. So that can lead to social isolation and social awkwardness. One fact that I thought was really fun from Turnbull's article was that the Milky Way is said to come from Artemis's testament. Her flower is a beautiful anemone. Now, sadly, the plant that I have here that is an anemone hasn't flowered, so you can't see the beautiful white flower. But the beautiful white flower is kind of like one layer of a rose. That's what it looks like. And speaking of roses, Aphrodite, she is the goddess that represents the lover. And so this is our sensual, emotional, creative side of our femininity. And so I'm comfortable with the creative side of my femininity, but this emotional and sensual side, I think, is the area that I have to work on the most because that is the area I think that was most hurt by trauma in the past. So, in terms of my own femininity, this is the area that I have to work on going forward. And so, the shadow side of that. Would be difficulty controlling your emotions and the constant need for external validation. Now, those two things I do not relate to because I also don't relate to the positive side of this. So they do, I can see how they go together, but they don't reflect my current state of my sense of femininity. But her flower is the rose. And I found this beautiful, beautiful rose that was started out looking sort of yellow. And then as it blooms, it becomes quite pink with a little bit of yellow in the center, but it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous rose. So that you'll see in the video of the garden. So in terms of making the garden, what I did was I took an area of the property that was a meadow and I got the lawnmower out and I mowed a spot that actually is, if you look, it's heart-shaped. So I made a heart-shaped garden. And then I set out to look for plants. Now, at the time, I hadn't found the Turnbull article. So my first plants that you'll see in the garden are healing plants, things like lavender and mint and different kinds of sage, different kinds of things that are used for their healing properties. And so I started out with that, but then I found this article by Turnbull that had the flowers of the goddesses, and then I set out searching for them and found a wonderful greenhouse near Napanee, Ontario, that had all of the flowers I needed, and the woman who runs the greenhouse was so helpful in helping me find each of the flowers. So that in itself was a wonderful experience because we both had a lot of fun with that. Then I found some ceramic pots and I painted them with the colors that Turnbull's article suggests relate to these goddesses. And then I found some images online of each of the goddesses that I felt best reflected the colors and nature of the garden that I was creating. And so I created these signs to put with each flower so you would know which flower represents which goddess. And so I've created a YouTube video of the garden, so walking through the garden, seeing each of the flowers. So I will send you that link separately because there's no way to show it within this PowerPoint presentation that I could figure out. So finally, what did I learn from this and what does it have to do with my sense of femininity going forward? So it really helped me really think through both the positive and negative aspects of my personality and how they relate to my femininity, as discussed previously with these two goddesses. So one area that I know that I need to work on in terms of my shadow is this lack of connection to my emotional and sensual side of me. And so I am working on that and I think it's really important to my leadership because self-awareness is so important to leadership. And I don't believe that is with the Spider Plant Foundation. I mainly work with women who've been traumatized, who've had especially sexual trauma. So I think it's really important to show in my own growth that you can actually get back in touch with those sides of yourself that have been so deeply hurt. And in doing so, you flourish. So that that goes to the leadership skills going forward. And also this exercise allowed me to spend lots of time in my garden. And that was very healing for me physically and mentally. So I was very sick with Lyme disease during the time I created this garden. So I had to take it slowly, but just spending time outside and the smells and the colors and it's very sensual nature of gardening. It's very sensual. Just even playing with the dirt and getting all dirty and then taking a shower and feeling clean, all those things really improved my mindfulness. And I believe, again, that mindfulness is very important because in terms of leadership, because it goes to self-awareness, also goes to awareness of those around you. So if you're always paying attention to the now, you can notice when somebody's not feeling well, when they need support. So that in terms of being a good leader is very important. Also, I haven't painted in about a year. So maybe even more than a year. And this exercise actually got me to want to paint again. So I paint landscapes and I paint people with their pets. So I actually had a friend come up to the Spider Plant Foundation property and go on a painting expedition with me. And we went to Lake Mazenot and we did an oil painting together, which I'd never done before. It was really fun. So that really just kind of, and now that I've done a painting again, I'm just wanting to paint, 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 paint. So it's really got my creative juices flowing again. And I do believe that. And then one thing that was interesting when I went on this painting expedition was that everybody who came across us as we were painting were just so enthralled that we were painting just at all. And we're like, oh, wow, that's so beautiful, which it really wasn't. But just the people's reaction, and you can see how in doing something creative, you inspire others to do the same. Um, and finally, this exercise really brought home for me the importance of basing your self-worth and your sense of purpose on your own values and not giving energy to things that are not in accordance with your values and not life-giving. So if you're going to spend time on anything, spend time on your creative side, spend time on making things pretty, on making things beautiful, on inspiring other people, and not on things that are just time consuming and not life-giving. So that is my presentation. Now here are my references. These are the articles. Actually this Turnbull, there were separate articles for each of the goddesses, but this Time Critter was the one with the quiz in it. And here are the references for the images that I found online for each of the goddesses. There were some that didn't have a lot of information, so I did my best with what I could find.